The Other Side of West Side Story. This is a poetry journey in 5 stops. Stop 1, the world painted in white. An artist with a vision is a powerful force. In 1947, Jerome Robbins had a vision, a modern Romeo and Juliet version in which an Irish Catholic family and a Jewish family would be the classic collision. But history would change his course, for there were real calamities coming to friction. Robbins set up to find a team and funds, but while he got ready to roll, generations of injustice were asking for refunds, and the marginalized sons were now fighting back in Espanol. Decades of clashes between Chicanos and the white establishment that had led to the Zoot Suit riots, portrayed with white lies and bias, came to a head when the government destroyed the home to generations of Mexican Americans. Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop, strong communities running their own schools and churches and managing their own land, were cheated of their sovereignty to make way for the Dodger Stadium. 300 families homeless without restitution. Meanwhile, masses of Puerto Ricans rolled into New York in what was called the Great Migration, engineered by Operation Bootstrap, an aggressive plan for industrialization to switch the island's agricultural economy, providing cheap English labor and huge tax exemptions to American corporations. The local scoundrels and the mainstream audits grabbed the profits and shipped the displaced agricultural workers to New York, where they were ill-equipped to find a job. The sons of those workers met hostility both by white Americans and white immigrants, which led to the infamous Puerto Rican gang wars. By the time Robbins assembled a team and funds, a conflict between an Irish and a Jewish family would have been lame, when there were gangs with chains and knives and guns. Robbins cooked up a different scenario, where the classic collision was between warring Chicanos. But Lawrence was more familiar with New York gang wars in Harlem, and at the mention of Latino beats, Robbins was immediately swayed. After all, one group of immigrants is the same as the other. One more time, the scenario shifted. The title changed to West Side Story, and the play was set for the fight. The final parties, the Puerto Rican Sharks and the American Jets. American equals white. The 1961 whitewash version of West Side Story omits our history and talks only about the success of a brilliant artist and a great story that revolutionized American musicals and was a best-selling play and movie that received multiple awards. I'm flipping the story now, okay? So take my color lenses and see it from a different perspective. The original West Side Story is not and never meant to be about Puerto Ricans. They took our music, our dances and songs, our pain and oppression, and created an entertaining piece that had nothing to do with Puerto Ricans. It could have been any group fighting for turf. For me, the original production of West Side Story is the story of the great cultural theft by which the oppressed, be it African American, Puerto Ricans, Latinos, immigrants, women, or other minorities, end up being a high-ticket topic for the ambitions of white privileged men and the profit of the 1%. To be clear, it is not writing about the oppressed that makes a cultural theft. To me, what makes it a theft is using the pain of the oppressed for your profit. What makes it a theft is that those whose story was told had no voice, no benefit from the telling of the story. They steal our historical artifacts. They steal our stories. They steal our music. They steal our dances. They steal our potential. They steal our past, present, and future. And they get fame and fortune for it. Stop number 2. We are not so lucky. They steal our past, present, and future. And they get fame and fortune for it. We are not so lucky. Ask Joe Bataan. Joe Bataan is the originator of the New York Latin soul style that paralleled Latin boogaloo and anticipated disco. Joe told me a tiny part of his story as we worked together in East Harlem. In 1959, at the tender age of 15, he got arrested for stealing $5 and ended up with 2 years of jail. Joe, an Afro-Filipino adopted by the Puerto Ricans, was up for a scholarship after cleaning his act, just like Tony. But when he went up against the judge, he was sentenced to 5 years, 1 year for each dollar. That's a good definition of social injustice. Next up, we're gonna move everything to the east side, from the west to the east, El Barrio, East Harlem, New York. When Sergeant Cesar Soriano told me his story about the Harlem gangs, and later in the wars of the United States, I saw the story of Puerto Rican men and other men of color used as cannon fodder in the wars of the United States. Beyond that, I saw the story of all men who are raised in the concept of power as domination. I used the name Bang Bang for this man. This is an excerpt from the poetry collection De Pueblo en Pecho, A Heart Full of My People, from the poem I wrote based on Cesar's story, The Eternal Soldier. From the window of his tiny apartment, Bang Bang looked at the terrifying expanse between his home and the school. His small heart beat hard against his chest. He would have to cross enemy territory. He still did not know exactly who they were. Italians, Greeks, Polish, Irish, Gringo. He could not yet distinguish the accents and the subtleties. But he knew one thing. Their skin was white, and his skin was brown. They saw him as the enemy, and there were more of them. He could run. He could hide and blend into the shadows. He could use camouflage and disguise. His imagination was drawing maps to save his skin when his little sister took his hand. Take good care of her, Mom said. She is your responsibility. Bang Bang looked at his mother, eyes red from tears, shoulders stooped from the weight of taking care of both of them without the help of a father. You're the man of your house now. He remembered Grandma's words as she cried in the porch and while hugging him so tight. Bang Bang squared off his tiny shoulders, took his little sister's hand, and he got ready to fight. So let's move to the Lower Side, Loisaida. Stop number 4. Arte es Ana, artesana. Art is Anne. The only character I resonated with in West Side Story was Annie, and this was because she was created and played by a Puerto Rican, Chita Rivera. But I know another Ana, a Puerto Rican from the Lower Side. When I met Doña Ana, she had huge carpal syndrome in both wrists. from years of sewing non-stop in the infamous sweatshops. This is an excerpt from the poem I wrote for the same collection based on Doña Ana's story. Ana, evicted from the coffee and the cane of her native island. Ana, cotton artisan, embroidering hearts over her knees. Dreams shipped to distant shores, Caribbean Sea dividing her life in half. Her island at a distance, a stitch in the Atlantic Ocean. Provenance, Loíza Aldea. Destination, Loisaida. Ana, polyester artisan, riveting her lungs with factory smoke. Here in Nueva York, the city of the golden paving stones, smoke and fabric, sweat and blood, smoke and fabric, sweat and blood. Ana, attached to the sweat dripping from an old singer. Con la punta al pie, con la punta al pie, con la punta al pie, dale que dale sin parar. With the tip of the toe, with the tip of the toe, with the tip of the toe, Ana pasted to the pedal. They flung her children in school because they did not answer in the only language known to intelligence. Ana saw, night and day she saw, without seeing what she saw, without being able to guess the form the garment would take. Taka-taka, the foreman's eyes over her shoulders. Taka-taka, her swollen foot on the treadle. Taka-taka, rush pricking her finger. Taka-taka, rush weighing down her wrist, her crafting pride on the floor, lost among the remnants. Taka-taka-taka. Pieces and more pieces. There's not enough hours a day to pay our debts. 500 pieces pay the rent. 300 pieces pay the rice and beans. 100 pieces pay the children's clothes. Another 100 pieces get the kids' notebooks and books. 240 pieces pay electricity and gas. And with some 600 pieces, we may have enough to pay the income tax. Avanza, Ana, avanza. Rush, rush, Ana, hurry up. Los de adelante corren mucho y los de atrás se quedarán. Those ahead will get the best and we who sweat will stay behind. Stop number 5. So here's the other side of West Side Story. We have voices of our own. They are strong and brave, vibrant with love and imagination. Now you have heard them.
Bello, bello, bello. Coño, me hiciste llorar, no me jodas.
Bravo.